The manor had been watching Elise for 3 days before she finally noticed it watching back. She'd arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, her sedan coughing up the overgrown drive like a dying animal making one last pilgrimage. The Ashworth estate loomed against the October sky, all Gothic spires and accusatory windows, exactly as forbidding as the inheritance letter had promised. Her great-aunt Marjorie, whom she'd met exactly once at age 7, had left her this monstrosity along with a terse note. For the girl who sees what others don't. Elise had never been sure what that meant. She was a restoration specialist, yes, but hardly special. She cleaned paintings, revealed what artists had originally intended beneath centuries of grime and bad touch-ups. There was no magic in it, just chemistry and patience. The manor's interior smelled of old velvet and older secrets. Dust motes swirled in the amber light filtering through stained glass, creating patterns that seemed almost intentional. Elise moved through the rooms cataloging, making lists, trying to assign value to decades of accumulated existence. Most of it would need to be sold. She had a small apartment in Boston, a life that fit into predictable boxes. This sprawling testament to excess had no place in it. She found the painting on the 3rd day, in a locked room on the eastern wing. The door had refused her twice before, the old lock stubborn despite her various keys. On that 3rd attempt, frustrated and ready to call a locksmith, she'd simply pushed, and it had opened as easily as if it had never been locked at all. The room beyond was a study, lined with books whose spines had faded to illegibility. And there, dominating the wall opposite the door, hung a portrait that made her breath catch. It was large, perhaps 6 feet tall, depicting a woman in a garden. But it was the quality of the work that stunned her. The technique was masterful, each brush stroke visible yet perfect, the colors rich despite what must be considerable age. The woman's face held an expression Elise couldn't quite name, not quite sadness, not quite longing, something more complicated, more alive, too alive. Elise stepped closer, professional instincts engaged. The paint looked fresh in places, as though someone had been working on it recently. But that was impossible. The room had clearly been sealed for years. She reached out, stopping just short of touching the canvas, and that's when she saw it. The woman's chest moved, just barely. The slightest rise and fall, the gentle rhythm of breathing. Elise jerked back, her heart hammering. She closed her eyes, counted to 10, looked again. Nothing. The painting was still, perfectly normal, completely inanimate as all paintings should be. "You're tired," she told herself, her voice too loud in the silent room. 3 days of dust and stress. You're seeing things. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in the painting was looking at her differently now. Aware, amused perhaps, at Elise's denial. That night, Elise dreamed of gardens. She walked through topiaries that formed words she couldn't quite read, past fountains that ran with paint instead of water. The woman from the portrait was there, always just ahead, her dress the color of storms. When Elise called out, the woman turned and her face was kind. "You came," the woman said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I don't understand," Elise replied, and woke with those words still on her lips. Morning brought weak sunshine and the determination to be rational. Elise returned to the study with her equipment, cameras, lights, her magnifying glass. She would examine the painting properly, document it, understand it through the lens of expertise rather than exhaustion. The portrait resisted understanding. Her photographs came out blurred, as though the woman were moving too quickly to capture. The paint resisted her chemical tests, not in the sense that it didn't react, but that it reacted differently each time, as though it couldn't decide what it was made of. And when she looked at it directly, without the buffer of her instruments, she could swear the woman's expression changed subtly. A raised eyebrow here, a curve of the lips there. "What are you?" Elise whispered. The painting, of course, didn't answer. But that night, the dreams came again. This time, the woman in the garden spoke more freely. Her name was Serafina, she said, and she'd been waiting a very long time. The garden around them was beautiful but incomplete, filled with flowers that existed in no earthly palette, trees that grew in impossible directions. "Your aunt understood," Serafina said, gesturing at the strange landscape. "She came here often. We had such conversations." "This isn't real," Elise insisted. "You're a dream, a painting, an hallucination brought on by breathing in too much old house." Serafina smiled. "Does it matter? You're here, I'm here. We're having this conversation. Isn't that real enough? Nothing about this is real. Then you have nothing to lose by listening." Elise wanted to argue, but the dream logic held. So she listened as Serafina told her story. She had been a painter once, A real woman who'd lived nearly 200 years ago, who'd made the mistake of loving art more than life itself. She'd discovered a technique, a way of binding not just image but essence to canvas. She'd painted herself into immortality, or what passed for it. But immortality in 2 dimensions came with limitations. She could see the world only through the eyes of those who looked at her. She could speak only in dreams. She could breathe but never leave her garden of paint and possibility. Why? Elise asked. Why would anyone choose this? I thought I was choosing forever, Serafina said quietly. I didn't understand that forever without change is just another kind of ending. Elise woke with tears on her face. The days developed a rhythm. Elise spent her mornings researching, diving into her great-aunt's papers, discovering a woman she'd never known. Marjorie Ashworth had been an artist herself, though she'd kept it private. Her journals were filled with sketches and theories, attempts to understand what Serafina had done, to perhaps reverse it. But they were also filled with affection, conversations recorded, a friendship that had spanned decades. She's lonely, Marjorie had written in her final entry. I wish I could stay longer, but bodies fail where paintings endure. Perhaps Elise will come. Perhaps she'll understand. The afternoons, Elise spent with the painting itself. She stopped trying to document it scientifically and started simply looking. She noticed how the garden changed subtly day by day. A new flower here, a shifted shadow there. She noticed how Serafina's painted face seemed to track her movement through the room. And yes, she noticed the breathing, which had become unmistakable once she allowed herself to see it. And the nights brought dreams that felt increasingly less like dreams. She and Serafina walked the impossible garden, and Serafina showed her wonders. Flowers that bloomed in sequences that told stories. Trees whose bark bore the names of everyone who'd ever truly seen the painting. A fountain that reflected not what was, but what could be. You could join me, Serafina said one night, the offer casual but weighted with hope. Your aunt considered it, you know. Toward the end. A way to keep talking, keep being. The technique is in my studio, in the painting. You need only step through. Into a painting? Elise's laugh was shaky. That's madness. Is it? Serafina gestured at the dreamscape around them. You're already halfway here. Every night you come further in. Eventually, the boundary will dissolve completely. The only question is whether you choose it or it chooses you. Elise woke in a panic. She spent that day avoiding the study entirely, trying to focus on the mundane tasks of estate management. But the manor itself seemed to pull at her. Every corridor leading eventually back to that eastern wing, every door opening in that direction. By evening, she gave in and returned. The painting had changed. The garden now had a path that led toward a distant structure. A studio, Elise realized. And Serafina stood at the beginning of the path, one hand extended in invitation. The expression on her painted face was hopeful, vulnerable in a way Elise had never seen. I know you're in there, Elise said to the canvas. I know you can hear me somehow. I need to understand. What happens if I refuse? That night's dream was different. Serafina met her at the garden's edge, and her face was sad. Nothing happens, she said. You sell the manor. The painting ends up in storage somewhere, or in a collector's gallery where it will be seen but never understood. I continue. You continue. We both go on, separate, until we don't. And if I accept, then you paint yourself into forever, and I have a companion in immortality. We could create such beautiful things together, Elise. Your eye for restoration, my understanding of the technique. We could build worlds within this canvas. I'd be trapped. You'd be preserved. There's a difference. Is there? Serafina's expression softened. Your aunt asked me the same thing. The answer is, I don't know anymore. I've been here so long I can't remember what freedom felt like, but I remember loneliness. And I know that sharing eternity is better than facing it alone. Elise spent a week wrestling with the decision. She researched obsessively, finding fragments of stories about painters who disappeared into their work, about portraits that seemed too alive. Most were dismissed as legend, artistic metaphor. But a few, a very few, had the ring of truth. A self-portrait in Vienna that museum guards refused to work near at night. A landscape in Prague whose season changed without explanation. Art that had crossed some invisible line from representation to reality. And she thought about her own life. The small apartment, the careful routine, the restoration work that was fulfilling but fundamentally about preserving the past rather than creating a future. She thought about the loneliness that she'd never acknowledged, the sense that she was always looking at life through glass, analyzing rather than experiencing. Maybe Serafina wasn't the only one who'd been trapped in 2 dimensions. On the 8th night, Elise made her decision. She entered the study at midnight, carrying her finest brushes and the oil paints she'd purchased in the village. The paintings seemed to glow in the darkness, Serafina's figure clearer than ever. The path to the studio was visible now, inviting. "I'm not going to join you," Elise said aloud. In the dream that followed, Serafina's face fell. "I understand. I'm sorry to have—" "Let me finish," Elise interrupted. "I'm not going to join you because you shouldn't be there either. You've been trapped long enough." Serafina stared at her. "There's no way out. I've tried. Your aunt tried. The technique can't be reversed." "Maybe not reversed," Elise said. "But what if it could be expanded?" She'd spent the week not just researching, but thinking, approaching the problem as a restoration challenge. The issue wasn't the technique itself, but its application. Serafina had bound herself to canvas. Yes, but canvas could be altered. Paintings could be extended, transformed, combined with new elements. What if, instead of escaping the painting, they brought the painting out? "It's never been done," Serafina breathed. "Neither had your original technique until you did it." For the next 3 months, Elise worked. She painted alongside the portrait, extending the canvas, adding new sections. She painted the manor's gardens as they existed in reality, creating a bridge between Serafina's impossible landscape and the actual world. She painted doorways and windows, thresholds that existed in that strange space between representation and reality. And slowly, carefully, she painted Serafina stepping out. It wasn't a quick process. Some days the work seemed to actively resist her, paint running in the wrong directions, colors mixing into muddy impossibility. Other days, it flowed so easily she could barely believe she was the one guiding the brush. She dreamed constantly now, working in both states, unable to tell where waking ended and sleep began. Serafina was there through all of it, offering guidance from within her painted prison. She taught Elise the techniques she'd discovered, the ways of binding essence to pigment, but she also learned from Elise, seeing her own work through the eyes of a restorer who understood both preservation and transformation. "You're giving me a chance I never gave myself," Serafina said one night as they worked in the dream studio. "The chance to change, to grow, to be imperfect and alive, rather than perfect and frozen." "Everyone deserves that chance," Elise replied. The transformation happened on a Thursday in February. Elise had been working since dawn, the final pieces coming together. The extended canvas now showed a complete journey. Serafina's garden flowing into the manor's grounds, the painted studio opening onto the actual study. And there, at the boundary between painted and real, Serafina herself stood at a threshold, 1 foot in each world. Elise added the final brushstroke, a highlight on the door's handle, suggesting it could turn, and felt something shift in the air. The room grew warm. The scent of oil paint intensified, mixed with something floral and impossible. And then, with a sound like fabric tearing, the painting simply opened. Serafina stepped through. She was exactly as she appeared in the portrait and utterly different. 3-dimensional, breathing with lungs instead of magic, her dress shifting in the draft from the window Elise hadn't realized was open. She looked around the study with wide eyes, touching the furniture with trembling fingers. "I can feel it," she whispered. "The wood grain, the dust, everything." Elise found she was crying. "Is it what you hoped?" Serafina turned to her, and her smile was radiant. "It's terrifying and wonderful and so much more real than I remembered. Thank you." They stood in the study as the afternoon light slanted through the windows, 2 women separated by centuries but connected by understanding. Behind them, the painting had changed one final time. The garden was still there, beautiful but clearly unpopulated now. The studio stood empty, but the path remained, no longer leading inward but outward, toward possibility. "What will you do now?" Elise asked. Serafina laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Everything. Experience everything. Eat food that has texture, feel rain, make mistakes. Paint things that are imperfect and all the better for it." She paused. "And perhaps, if you're willing, I'll do some of those things with you. You've given me freedom, but I find I don't want to face it entirely alone." Elise thought about her small apartment in Boston, her careful life, and she thought about this manor full of secrets, about paintings that breathed and dreams that taught, about the possibility of creating something entirely new rather than simply preserving the old. "I think," she said slowly, "I'd like that very much." The Ashworth estate remained in Elise's possession. She converted it into something unprecedented, Part museum, part studio, part sanctuary for art that existed in that strange space between the real and impossible. Other pieces found their way there. Paintings that seemed too alive, sculptures that moved when no one watched. And Elise, with Serafina's help, learned to care for them, to understand them, to occasionally set them free. She never did sell the breathing painting. It hung in the study still, a reminder that boundaries were meant to be crossed, that eternity was a choice rather than a fate, and that sometimes the most important restorations weren't about returning things to their original state, but about helping them become something new. On quiet evenings, Elise and Serafina would sit in that study, looking at the portrait of the empty garden. And sometimes, just sometimes, they would see new flowers blooming there, painted by no hand they could name, evidence that magic, once awakened, never truly slept. The world had been altered, not by grand gestures, but by small acts of belief. And Elise, who had once seen herself as someone who merely looked at life through glass, had learned that sometimes the glass was meant to be shattered, the frame meant to be stepped through, the boundary between observation and experience meant to be erased entirely. She had uncovered a breathing painting in a cursed manner. What happened after had altered her world forever. But more importantly, she had altered herself and learned that transformation, messy, imperfect, impossible transformation, was the most magical discovery of all.